You know that feeling? Someone asks you a question, you answer, and then nothing. Silence. Awkward, suffocating silence.
And you're both just standing there wondering what to do next. Is the conversation over? Are they bored? Did I say something wrong?
What if we told you that awkward silence isn't a failure? It's an opportunity.
Today on Talk, Learn, Teach, we're teaching you how to turn every conversation into something real and engaging. Stay with us.
Hey everyone, welcome to Talk, Learn, Teach. I'm James, and I'm so glad you're here.
I'm Rachel, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive in, we want to say thank you. Your support keeps us going.
If you're new, please hit that subscribe button. This episode could change how you experience conversations forever.
And share it with someone who gets stuck in small talk. You'll be giving them a gift.
Let's dive in. Rachel, let me start with something. When was the last time you had a conversation that just flowed naturally?
Oh man, I had one last week at a coffee shop. This woman and I just started talking, and suddenly 20 minutes had gone by.
What made it feel natural?
She was genuinely curious. She asked real questions. She listened, and I felt like she actually cared about my answers.
So it's not about the topic, it's about how someone shows up?
Completely. I've had conversations about weather with someone who was so engaged that it felt meaningful.
And I've had conversations about travels or work that felt completely empty and transactional.
Right. So what creates that difference?
I think it starts with understanding why most conversations die, and there are some patterns.
What are they?
The first is what I call the fact dump. Someone asks you a question, and instead of inviting them into your story, you just hand them facts.
Give me an example.
Okay, so someone asks, "How was your weekend?" and you say, "Good, I went to the beach, it was sunny, the water was cold, we left at 3."
That's a fact dump?
That's a fact dump. You've told them what happened, but you haven't invited them to care. There's no emotion, no curiosity, no reason for them to ask a follow-up question.
So it closes the conversation instead of opening it.
Exactly. Compare that to saying, "I went to the beach and had this weird experience where a seagull stole my sandwich." Suddenly, they want to know more.
Because there's a story?
Because there's humanity. There's something unexpected. What's the second pattern?
The one-way question. Someone asks you a question, you answer, and you never ask them anything back.
That's so common.
It is, and it makes the other person feel like you don't care about them.
Even if you do?
Even if you care deeply. But if you don't ask questions, they won't know it.
So conversations are actually a two-way street?
More than that, conversations are a dance. If only one person is dancing, it just looks weird. I want to talk about something specific, the trap of being too focused on being a good listener.
That's a trap?
It can be, because some people listen so intently that they forget to contribute.
What do you mean?
They're so afraid of interrupting or saying the wrong thing that they just nod and make small sounds. Oh yeah, I see.
And that's bad because?
Because the other person feels like they're just talking to themselves. There's no real connection forming.
So there's a balance?
There absolutely is. Good conversations need someone who listens and someone who contributes. Both matter.
How do you contribute without dominating?
By sharing relevant experiences, by asking thoughtful questions, by showing up authentically.
Give me an example.
Okay, so someone tells you they just got promoted. A one-way listener says, "That's great, congrats," and stops.
And?
A real conversationalist says, "That's amazing. How are you feeling about it? What does the new role involve?" And if they have something relevant, they might say, "I remember when I got my first promotion, I was terrified about messing up. Are you feeling that?"
So you're creating space for the conversation to grow.
Yes, you're saying, "I see you. I care about this. Let's explore it together."
That's powerful.
It really is, because people can feel when you genuinely care.
Let's talk about silence, because silence might be the biggest conversation killer.
What's wrong with silence?
Nothing's wrong with it, in theory, but in practice, most people panic during silence.
Why?
Because they interpret it as failure, like they said something wrong or the other person is bored.
But that's usually not true.
Usually not. Sometimes the other person is just thinking. Sometimes they're gathering their thoughts. Sometimes they're shy.
So silence doesn't equal failure.
Silence is just silence. What matters is what you do with it.
What should you do with it?
Don't panic. Don't fill it with filler words or nervous chatter. Just sit with it for a moment. Often the other person will continue.
And if they don't?
Then you gently nudge the conversation forward with a thoughtful question.
Not a desperate question.
Not, so do you like, things? But something connected to what you were just talking about.
Give me a real example.
I was at a professional dinner once and I asked someone about their work. They gave a short answer and then went quiet.
What did you do?
I didn't panic. I just said, I noticed you lit up a bit when I mentioned that project. Is that something you're passionate about? Suddenly, they were talking for 20 minutes. All that enthusiasm was there, waiting for someone to recognize it.
So you read what was underneath the silence.
Exactly. You have to listen to the whole person, not just the words.
I think vulnerability is huge in keeping conversations alive. Do you agree?
Completely. People connect with vulnerability way more than with perfection.
But people are so afraid of being vulnerable.
They are. They think if they show any weakness, the other person will judge them.
But
But it's actually the opposite. Vulnerability creates permission for the other person to be real too.
How does that work?
If you share something honest and a little raw, the other person realizes they can drop their mask too.
Give me an example.
Okay, so I was at a work event and I was struggling with small talk. I said to someone, I'm going to be honest, small talk makes me kind of anxious.
What happened?
The person's entire face changed. They said, oh my God, me too. I thought it was just me. And suddenly we had a real conversation, not about weather or jobs, but about why small talk is hard and what makes conversations feel real.
So your vulnerability gave them permission?
It absolutely did. And it deepened the connection way faster than any amount of surface-level chatting could have.
But isn't that risky? What if they judge you?
Some people might. And that's okay, because those aren't people you want to connect with anyway.
So vulnerability is actually filtering?
It's actually filtering. It helps you find people who can meet you authentically. That's way better than fake connections.
Let's talk about asking questions, because there are good questions and there are questions that kill conversations.
What's the difference?
A bad question is close-ended. Did you have a good day? Yes or no, done.
And a good question?
Opens the door. What was the most interesting thing that happened today? Now they can share more.
So it's about how you phrase it.
Completely. And it's about what you're curious about.
What do you mean?
I mean, people can tell if you're genuinely interested or just making polite conversation.
How do they tell?
Because when you're genuinely curious, you follow up. You ask deeper questions. You remember details they mentioned before.
So you're like a detective.
Kind of, but a friendly detective who actually cares about the case.
Give me an example of good questioning.
Okay, someone mentions they just finished a book. A polite person says, "Oh, cool, what was it about?" and leaves it at that.
And?
And real conversationalist says, "What was it about?" And more importantly, did it change how you think about anything? And then they listen to the answer and ask something that builds on it.
So you're creating layers.
Exactly. Each answer opens a new door, and the conversation becomes this living, breathing thing.
But how do you know what to ask?
You listen, actually listen, not just wait for your turn to talk, but hear what they're saying and what they're not saying.
I want to talk about something I call the story shift. This is when you move from facts to feelings.
What's an example?
Someone says, I just quit my job. Fact delivered.
And the story shift?
I just quit my job, and I'm terrified, but also more excited than I've been in years.
So you're revealing the emotional truth.
Yes. And suddenly the conversation isn't about the job, it's about the person. It's about their life.
Does that always work?
Not always. Some people aren't ready for that vulnerability, but most people are hungry for it.
Because we're all kind of isolated in our own heads.
We are. And when someone shows us their real experience, not just the highlight reel, it's like relief.
Someone actually sees us.
Exactly. Someone actually sees us. And that's what makes conversations feel alive. I had a conversation with a stranger at a park, and she mentioned her kids were grown and left home.
I said, that must bring up some big feelings.
And?
She got tears in her eyes and said, everyone congratulates me, but nobody asks how I'm actually doing. And we had this beautiful conversation about transitions and loss and growth.
All because you shifted to feelings?
All because I acknowledged that facts aren't the whole story. People are the story. Okay, I want to teach everyone something I learned. It's called mirroring, and it's a game changer.
What's mirroring?
It's when you reflect back what someone said, but you add depth to it.
Give me an example.
Someone says, I'm learning French. A normal response is, oh, that's cool.
And mirroring?
You're learning French? That's such a commitment. What's driving that for you?
So you're validating what they said and showing you're engaged.
Exactly. You're saying, I heard you. That's significant. Tell me more.
Why is that powerful?
Because most people spend their conversations feeling invisible. Nobody really acknowledges what they're saying.
And mirroring makes them feel seen?
It makes them feel like they matter, like what they're doing or feeling is worth paying attention to.
That's actually so simple.
But so many people don't do it. They just respond with, oh yeah, and move on.
So it's about slowing down.
It's about slowing down and actually engaging with what someone is sharing. I tried this with my neighbor. She mentioned she was learning to paint. I could have said, that's nice. But instead, I said, wait, you're learning to paint? That's beautiful. What made you want to start?
What happened?
She actually got excited, told me all about the class, the challenges, the breakthroughs, and now we have real conversations every time we see each other.
Because you saw her.
Because I saw her, and she felt that.
Here's something people don't realize. You can't have good conversations if you're bringing only 70% of yourself.
What do you mean?
I mean, some people are so focused on saying the right thing that they edit out their personality.
That sounds exhausting.
It is, and it shows. The conversation feels stiff and formal and kind of lifeless.
So you need to bring your whole self?
Your sense of humor, your opinions, your quirks, your passions, all of it.
But what if people don't like your whole self?
Then they're not your people, and that's okay. You're not looking for everyone to like you. You're looking for real connection.
How do you get comfortable bringing your whole self?
You start small. Share an opinion. Make a joke. Be a little weird. See what happens.
And if they react positively?
You keep showing up. You keep being more real.
And if they don't?
You find people who appreciate you, and the conversations with them will be so much richer.
I have a friend who's completely unpredictable. Like you never know what she's going to say next, and conversations with her are always amazing.
Why?
Because she's not trying to be anything other than herself. She's funny, kind of wild, honest about her struggles, and people gravitate toward her.
Because she gives them permission to be real too?
Exactly. She shows up so fully that everyone else relaxes.
One thing separates amazing conversationalists from everyone else. They remember details.
What kind of details?
Small stuff. Someone mentions their kid's soccer game. Months later, you ask how the game went.
That seems simple.
It is simple, but nobody does it. And when you do, people feel incredibly seen.
Because you were actually listening?
Because you were actually listening and you cared enough to remember.
That's really the ultimate compliment in a conversation, isn't it?
It is. Because memory equals care.
How do you remember details if you have a bad memory?
Write them down. Right after the conversation, jot down something they mentioned that mattered to them. I did this with a coworker who mentioned her mom was sick. I wrote down, "Mom recovering from surgery." 3 weeks later, I asked how her recovery was going.
What happened?
She got emotional, said nobody ever asks follow-up questions, and our entire relationship shifted because I actually cared about her life.
So it's not about big gestures.
It's never about big gestures. It's about showing up consistently and genuinely.
Well, let's talk about something tricky. What happens when you disagree with someone?
Most conversations end there.
Because people get defensive?
Exactly. Someone says something you disagree with, and suddenly you're arguing instead of conversing.
How do you disagree without killing the conversation?
You stay curious. You don't assume you're right. You ask questions.
Like what?
That's interesting. What made you think that? Or, I see it differently, but I'm curious about your perspective.
So you're keeping the door open.
You're keeping the door open. You're saying, I don't agree, but I respect you enough to understand where you're coming from.
Does that always work?
Not always. Some people want to convince you. But if someone is actually open to conversation, this approach keeps it alive.
I have a friend where we disagree about basically everything politically, but we have the best conversations.
How?
Because neither of us is trying to win. We're both curious about why the other person thinks what they do.
That's rare.
It is, and it's because we've built enough trust that disagreement feels safe.
So trust has to come first.
Trust or curiosity, usually one builds the other.
Here's something subtle but important. You have to match someone's energy.
What do you mean?
If someone's excited about something, you bring energy. If they're vulnerable and soft, you soften too.
But what if you're not naturally in that mood?
You don't have to fake it, but you can meet them where they are.
How?
You shift your tone. You lean in. You slow down or speed up depending on them.
That sounds like code switching.
It's kind of like that, but it's not fake. It's authentic response to their authentic presence.
Give me an example.
Okay, someone's sharing something deep and sad, and you're naturally pretty upbeat. You don't suddenly become depressed, but you do drop the volume of your energy a bit. You become more present, more thoughtful.
So you're meeting them without losing yourself.
Exactly. And that creates this beautiful dance where both people feel respected.
What happens if you don't match energy?
Then there's a disconnect. They feel like you don't understand them, or you think they're exhausting when really they just needed a different energy than you brought.
We talk a lot about keeping conversations alive, but what about how you end them?
That's actually crucial, because how you end shapes how the other person remembers the whole thing.
What's a bad ending?
Abrupt, like suddenly you're rushing off or giving them the brush off.
And a good ending?
You acknowledge what you talked about. You tell them it mattered. You create a door for future conversations.
How?
This was really nice. I loved hearing about your journey. Let's definitely do this again. And you mean it.
So you're actually closing consciously.
Yes, you're not just abandoning the conversation, you're honoring it.
That's beautiful.
It is. And it's why some conversations create real friendships and others just fade away.
All right, let's give our listeners something practical to do.
Your challenge is simple but powerful. Have one conversation this week where you try 3 things.
What 3 things?
1. Ask questions that don't have yes or no answers. 2. Share something real about yourself. 3. Remember one detail about their life to ask about later.
That's it?
That's it, but it will change how you experience conversations.
Because you're being more present?
Because you're showing up as a real person and inviting them to do the same.
And conversations become alive?
Conversations become alive. And that's where real connection happens. Thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for caring about becoming a better conversationalist.
Because that's what this is really about. It's not just small talk skills. It's about seeing people and being seen.
It's about connection.
Before you go, please subscribe to Talk, Learn, Teach. Hit that button. Help us reach more people.
And please drop a comment below. Tell us your story.
Have you had a conversation that changed you? What made it work?
Or what's your biggest challenge with keeping conversations alive?
We read every single comment, and your story might inspire someone else who's reading.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your whole selves to your conversations.
Until next time, listen more, ask better questions, and let people see you.
We'll see you on Talk, Learn, Teach.
Keep talking, keep connecting, keep growing.
Bye for now.